Welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today's video is about 10x events, specifically for Sacred Shards. So should I ever care about 10x events with my Sacred Shards? So we'll be looking at obviously the standard case, the 10x, and obviously comparing that against the 2x. So the answer is yes. Actually, I was quite surprised at the results. Halfway through, I was getting a bit depressed, thinking this is looking a bit ordinary. But actually, when we look at all the factors, there are some benefits to 10x events. But there is a but. Okay, it depends on how many of the legendaries you really want, and we'll go into a little bit of detail around why that's really important. Which legendaries are in the 10x? Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. And strangely enough, how many shards you're planning to pull. Later on in the video, we'll actually start looking at how the Mercy system and how pulls over time affect the chances and what that means as far as the 10x event is concerned. Right, so here we are. First thing we probably want to do is just set some baseline. So you really have two main events that affect your chance of pulling a legendary. Normal, or your 10x or whatever, or your bonus legendary is usually a 6% chance from your Sacred Shard, that's the gold on the right, or you occasionally have every 6 weeks a 2x event, which is the 12% chance of a legendary from each Sacred Shard on the right. And obviously the purple represents your chance of getting an epic. Right, but it's not that simple, right? So the first thing to note is that we're assuming that you're just not wanting any legendary. If you're happy for Noble or Pixniel to pop out of that portal, then you can probably stop watching this video at this point, because basically go for a 2x event. But if you're a bit more discerning and a bit more specific and saying, how can I control what I get so that I get the best chance of getting something that I want, or the best chance of getting something that I can even use, then this is where this is what I'm focusing on, right? So not all champions are created equal. So here's 14 champions, right? So if we say that these are the 14 champions that I really want, there's some that I don't want, there's a whole lot that I'll live with, but these are the ones that I want, then if you pull a legendary, that's a 12.6% chance. There's 111 pullable legendaries currently as at time of recording, 14, so that's 12.6% chance. So for a 12%, from a 2x event, obviously that makes a bigger circle. Let's go and see what that turns out to in real terms. For every shard you pop, non-mercy, obviously, there's a 1.5% chance that it is one of those 14, or a 0.76% chance that it's one of those 14 if it's outside a 2x event. Not great odds. So now let's have a look at our scenarios. So what we're going to be doing initially is focusing on the 10x events and the impact that has on the chances. So we're going to be running 3 scenarios, right? So the 3 scenarios are scenario 3, interestingly enough, I've done them in reverse order, but the naming of the scenarios also reflects the number of desirable champions. So there's normally 3 champions, legendary champions in any 10x, and the situation is that all 3 of them could be desirable, 2 of them could be desirable, or 1 of them could be desirable, and we're going to cover all those. And undesirable, well, they could be anything. Essentially, there's things that you want and that will activate you to take action, and there's things that, yeah, right, okay, that's nice, or things that you don't want, which are going to be put in the same bucket. If, for example, you just want any legendary and you'll use anything that comes through the portal, as I said before, yeah, then the 10x's make no difference to you. So what actually happens with the 10x? And looking at those 3 examples, basically 9 additional copies are put in, and what it does is it boosts the total number of champions. So instead of out of 111, it's out of 138. But your the number of land points that you would view as favorable increases accordingly. So if there's 3 desirable legendaries, let's say you're after Duchess, Rotis, and Valkyrie, and they're in the 10x, then basically it's a 41 out of 138. We'll get to see what that means as percentages on the next slide. If it's only 2, then it's 32 out of 138. Now that additional legendary, whatever it is that you don't want, actually suppresses the chances of getting something you do want, because their 9 copies are 9 additional copies of something you don't really want. And obviously the final situation there, scenario 1, one desirable legendary in a 10x event means that you've got basically a much lower chance, but still it's out of 138. Right. So there's a couple of key concepts we need to get through before we move on. And if you don't believe in these concepts, or if you don't really feel that they're important, well, then you're not going to be in a position to be able to make informed decisions about what it is that you're trying to achieve as far as gaining the legendaries that you really want. Now, the first of them is that if there's a 10x with, let's say, Duchess, Rotos, and Valkyrie, the first thing to note is that it actually increases the pool. You've got to view it as increasing the pool of desirable champions, right? So don't focus in on Duchess, Rotos, and Valkyrie. If you pull a Khaimar, are you really unhappy? Okay, so key concept number 1 is that 10x events are about improved chances to get what you want. They aren't trying, it would be nice to get the Duchess, but it's actually the fact that the Duchess, the Rotos, and the Valkyrie are in the pool along with the other stuff that you want. The stuff that you want pool is much bigger. So that's the first concept. That's the benefit of the 10x event. It's not about getting the name champions. It's about saying, I have a small pool of champions potentially, and my pool just got bigger. The second key concept is that you have to make a decision to make a decision, right? So if your strategy is, I don't mind about what legendary you pull, then basically we can't really focus on making a decision or really crisp decisions about when you should be pulling different types of shards or in different events, right? So the neutral column, basically what it means is you have to make a decision with your neutral column. Are you going to take action for the legendary is really the question that you need to focus on, right? So that neutral column, there can't be a neutral column. Either add it to your desirable list, add it to your undesirable list, right? So you may be okay with getting Brachus, but if it's not activating, don't put it in your desirable list. Your desirable list is stuff that you will take action to achieve. Otherwise, essentially it's undesirable, right? Okay, so you get those concepts, they're really important. Right, so back into the numbers. So with our 14 desirable legendaries, what I've done here is I've actually looked at those chances. So with scenario 1, it's 23 out of 138. That's a 16.7% chance, right? Which is actually greater than the 12.6% default of 14 over 11. So, if you're just pulling a single shard, for example, during a non-2x event, and there's only one of your desirable champions in the 10x, you're still a little bit better off. Obviously, with 2 desirable champions, the chances become much greater, and with 3 desirable champions, that's nearly 30%. So you've gone from about less than 13% to nearly 30%. So that is pretty big, right? So let's look at that in real chances. So you go from a 0.76% chance of getting what you want in default to a 1% chance with a 1 desirable champion in the 10x and 2 undesirable, to a 1.4 to 1.78. So that's actually quite a big increase. That's a whole percentage point increase of getting what you want. Those are tiny percentage points, and that's just the way that top-end champions work, right? That's, the chances of pulling legendaries, even with sacreds, is low, and the chance of getting some of these top-end out of the large amount of dross is actually pretty low. So just welcome to the reality of trying to get top-end champions. They are hard to get. Now, when we look at the 2x event, what actually happens is it's very interesting in that it comes in below the 10x. So if you've got only 14 champions, all I care about is these 14 champions, a low number of champions, then you'll actually find that your 10x is less efficient at getting you those champions than if they're all three of them are in the 10x, right? So the 2x will get you more legendaries that you can use as food, faction guardians or whatever. But if you're targeted on a small list and you really want that small list, those 10x's really start to add some benefit. So you can see that your 10x with 3 desirable champions, if your list is 14, is actually, I think, 0.2%, not 2.8% plus 0.28%. Decimal points in the wrong place there. Right, so there's 3 scenarios we'll look at, and anybody that saw my previous video, which is almost nobody, which compared a 2x with a guaranteed, with a bonus legendary event, will know that I ran through the same sort of scenarios: 25 desirable, 14 desirable, 5 desirable. So late game, sort of where I'm at is 25 desirable. Outside that, I'm really not fussed. Give me some epics. With 5 desirable, things get really interesting. The value of your 2x event goes right down. So if you're really late game and you say, I just want one of these 5 champions, anything else, I don't care, then essentially your 10x events becomes way more valuable, which is pretty, I suppose pretty basic logic. But this will give you some numbers on it anyway. So you can see the orders of magnitude. So 0.27% chance of getting a one of those 5 under normal scenarios outside of any events, 0.54% chance in a 2x event, but a 1.39% if you're lucky enough for 3 of those champions to be in a 10x. Still extremely low chances of getting those champions, but you can see the less champions that you really actually want, the higher the benefit of the 10x event. So let's look at 25 desirable, and what happens is the 2x tops out here. So obviously the more champions that you're happy to get, then the less value the 10x provides. So if you could imagine that you were happy with any champion at all of them, then the 10x provides 0 benefit, right? But if you only wanted one champion, then the 10x provides probably the most benefit of all. So let's go summarize where we're at. So basically, the less of the overall champion pool that you really want, the better the 10x events are for you. So let's put that in a graph form so that you can basically see what the breakpoints are. So here we are. This is it in graph form. So it starts at 3 because below 3 it doesn't make any sense. And I've stopped it at 80 because you can basically see where the trend lines are going. So what actually happens is that bottom line is the number of legendaries in the pool that are on your most wanted list. So, if you have 37 legendaries that are in the most wanted, in your most wanted list, at this point, the no event and the 10x event basically give you the same chance of getting it if you pull a legendary. And the reason for that is that the 2 legendaries that you don't desire are pushing, will start to at this point work against you. Now, point B, that line B, is at 74, right? So if you have 74 legendaries that you desire, at this point, if 2 of those are in the 10x and 1 isn't, at this point, it's another break point. Past this point, you're better off pulling outside the 10x because the impact of having that extra undesirable, suppressing your chances of getting the desirable ones, actually starts to work against you. And that blue line and that gold line basically meet at 110. If all 110 champions are what you want and there's a 10x, well, obviously anything that's in that 10x is desirable, so basically they converge. Let's look at what happens when we add the 2x in. So you can see that the 2x, if you're early game, that 2x is gold, right? Just stop looking at 10x, go straight for 2x. If you've basically got a big list, anything over 18 champions, then if you're basically saying, listen, there's there's 50 champions that I'd want, 20 champions, 30, 75, whatever. If you're above that 18 point, then the 2x provides you the better chance of getting what you want. Even if all three of those champions are in the 10x. At 12, what would happen is that at this point the 2x is better than having two desirable champions in the 10x, and obviously one desirable champion in the 10x. That line's crossed pretty quickly. But if you're really, really late game and there's three champions that you want, one of them's in the 10x, you're better off pulling at 10x chances at 6% than waiting for a 2x. And there we are, we've just narrowed in on it just so that you can really see what's going on. So there's the 18, the 12, and the 6. And that 18 is probably the really important breakpoint because it's unlikely. I mean, that list of 14 champions that I produced before, there's probably a few that I could add in there that I've missed out. Maybe one or two could come out of there, but 18 just seems to be there's probably 18 really top tier champions. If you think there's 12 really top tier champions, then obviously that D point is really important. Now, the other reason we're going to do this, we're looking at that 18 point, is this is what I'm going to simulate when we look at what happens when you pull over time. Because everything up to this point has been decision making if you have one shard to pull, right? If you have one shard to pull and you have 20 desirable champions, you pull it during a 2x. If you have one shard to pull and there are 3 desirable champions in the 10x, and you only care about 12 champions, then you pull during the 10x. But things aren't that simple because stuff happens when we start looking at the cumulative chances over time and the Mercy system. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick that 18 point and we're going to run it through. Okay, so the breakpoints are at a very low desired champion count for a single shard pull. Right, so anybody that may have seen my previous video, I recommend you have a look at it because I am going to do an update on it because I look at the benefit of a bonus legendary event versus a 2x event with rather surprising results and probably more surprises to come. So it is worth a look at, but basically exactly the same applies here. What happens when the Mercy system kicks in is that your chance goes up by 2% for every shard pulled after the 12th. But the net effect of that is it degrades the value of the 2x event. So the deeper into the Mercy system you get, the less valuable the 2x event is. So anything else that's going on that changes the numbers becomes more valuable, if that makes sense. So at the 12th shard, you have twice the chance of pulling a legendary during a 2x event as during a 10x, right? But at the 31st shard, there's only a 6% difference between them. I mean, well, actually it's a 12% difference between them because basically there's 50% chance and a 44% chance, but the difference between them reduces. And the best way to view it is that the 10x event puts you 3 ahead on the Mercy system. So after the 9th shard, I think it is, at the 9th shard, essentially you can treat yourself as being 3 ahead on the Mercy system as during a 10x. That's basically the net effect of it. So the next graph is the cumulative chance over time. And this is a really important graph. So basically what happens is this is by calculating the chance of not getting a legendary, you can work out the chance of getting a legendary. So this is an ode to you. So basically every shard pull is its own sort of event, right? This is how gambling works, right? So if you are under Mercy and you pull don't pull a legendary, then you're basically at 1 again. So just be aware. So if you were planning ahead of time and saying, well, I'm going to pull 11 shards, then this is what you would reasonably predict if a large number of people were doing it, that a lot of people would end up on this line. But it is, don't forget, it is luck. So what you do when you're pulling shards is you are gambling, so just be aware. So a really important point though is that over time, it becomes harder and harder not to get a legendary. And the difference between the 2x and the 10x, the 1x, sorry, the 1x and the 2x, or the non-2x and the 2x, actually starts to narrow. And that's a really important point. Now, once Mercy kicks in, obviously, and enough shard pools develops, you pretty much end up at a rounding error right at the top. And I think it's quite surprising to me how hard the Mercy system throws the sacreds up towards that 100% chance. So people say basically after, I don't know, 60 shards or something, you're nearly at 100% chance of getting a sacred. There's very, very few people who get a 60 shards. As you can see from this chart, there's very, very few people that go past 30 sacred shards without pulling a legendary. It's just, even at 40%, 30%, whatever, 20%, if you throw that enough, that's 20% is 1/5. If you pull 10 times, really, and it's going up 2%. So you can see why this graph goes up so hard and so fast. Now, the reason I wanted to point that out is so that this graph isn't too much of a shock. Okay, so the cumulative chance of getting a desirable legendary. So on the top, we have any legendary. That is just the previous graph. It's a bit squashed because I've stopped it at 30 rather than 40 or 50 or wherever I stopped the previous one. And then the bottom one is basically underneath that saying, what is a desired legendary? So the grey line is no event. The dark blue line down the bottom is a 2x event. And what you can see is that actually after a period of time, your chance, after a number of pulls, your chance with the 10x event starts to beat the chance even at the 2x. And the reason for that is that as your chance of not pulling a legendary declines to near zero, the 10x starts to become the raw value. So what it means is, see, I think what people get confused by is that they're basically saying you've got to pull a legendary and then you've got to, then what it comes out, right? They're not. So one is dependent upon the other. You need to pull a legendary in order to pull a desirable one. But when you pull a shard, it's a single event, if that makes sense. So although one has to precede the other, the chances are still, how am I trying to describe this? So you still have the percentage. So if we go all the way back up to the top of the pack here, remember that 1.5% of the 2x. So even though it is two stages, it is actually just a 1.5% or 0.76%, if that makes sense. So these are really low chances. So basically what happens is that as you work your way through pulling shards, your chances of not getting a legendary reduces, and when you pull, you are more likely to pull something desirable. So what does that mean for your 10x? Well, your 10x isn't as bad as you make out if you are trying to target specific champions. Now this is 18 champions, and as you can see, at some point you'd have a 100% chance to pull a legendary, pretty much at 30, with only a 33% chance to get something that you want out of those 18. That isn't you getting one of the 3 that are on that 10x. That is you getting one of those 3 or one of the other 15. So those are pretty low chances, but they are the best chances that you can get. So if you are specifically hard targeting champions, I would seriously consider looking at the 10x events. What the 2x events is, it gives you a better chance of getting a legendary. And if you're just happy pulling gold, go for the 2x. But if you're really hard targeting something that's top end, then the 10x's provide way more benefit. Because although, one of the things that I can't put into this is that you may pull a second one with a 2x. But it's only a 12% chance. So essentially, once you pull your first champion, you're back on this chart. Right. So there are a number of things that do erode the benefit of the 10x event. So I think, hopefully from the previous chart, you saw that the 10x actually can provide a bit of value, especially if you're looking to pull a large number of shards and you're hard targeting a small number of champions. But the things that do erode the benefit of the 10x event, well, it is the increasing number of legendaries. So the 10x actually doesn't provide you a great chance of getting any of the 10x champions at all. I think even if all of those 10x champions, so it's 138, you've got 30, including the original, plus the extra 9, so you've got 30 chances out of 138 of getting your 10x. That's less than 25%. The dupe system. Basically, what the dupe system does is it rewards you getting any legendary. So you're sort of back into the I don't care. Like, for example, I have recently got Arbiter. I would just love to get some dupe high elves. And I wouldn't be fussy what they are. I'll just whack them in the Factions Guardians because I want to push my way down towards getting that plus 10 speed. Faction Wars, to a certain degree, also erode the benefit 10x event because if the champion's workable during Faction Wars, then yeah, why wouldn't you do it? And events. And the reason that I say that is you can get some pretty nice rewards out of events. So, Sacred Shards are worth a lot. And this is just an event without even a fusion behind it. If there's a fusion, so Sacred Shards are worth, so maybe your best targeted way to use Sacred Shards to guarantee yourself a legendary is to pull during a summon rush in a fusion. So there you go. It has nothing to do with what your chances are during the event. Pull during summon rush. That's your best chance of targeting yourself in on a specific, during a fusion. That's your best chance of getting yourself a specific legendary. Anyway, I hope that provided a bit of information about the fact that the 10x events, although they seem less beneficial, if you're actually pulling any reasonable number of shards, and you do have to get a legendary, then you actually find the 10x are a great way of targeting in on those legendaries that you want. Hopefully this encourages you to go back and have a look at the video I did around the 2x event versus the bonus legendary. I'm going to do another video on that because I'm going to look at what happens, over over a long period of time, because I think actually those bonus legendary events are probably underappreciated. The other thing that I could do videos on, please leave comments, is on Voids or Ancients, and that cumulative chance of getting a legendary from a Void or an Ancient. That graph looks completely different from what I just showed you. So please go and have a look at the previous video. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it at least somewhat useful, and maybe it'll affect some of your decision making. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.